All right, welcome folks. We're a day late this week, long weekend, and just ended up pushing everything back a day. So welcome to the stream. Last time we were working together on something, we were working on the Amazon Q for Business Gen AI Assistant, mouthful. And I'm sorry about the screen resolution. I don't know what I did here, but I've messed it up somehow. So I'm getting this really... It's just doesn't look right. So I got to fix it, but we've had one of those days with technical issues today. So if you remember, we left off with the app pretty much built, but we had a few issues. So let's just kind of go over those issues so that we can kind of remember what they were. And then I'll show you what I did between the last stream and today, and we'll review our to-do list and we'll go from there. So if you remember, we got the application built, the retriever or an index built, and a retriever set up, and then we had done the data source, and we just did a simple Webcrawler data source, and it worked, but not really. Okay, so you can notice here, we now have 445-ish documents indexed from our website. And I'll show you what we ended up doing. And I got a little bit of help from AWS technical support on this. Let me zoom in because my screen resolution's all messed up here. But you can see that up till today, it was only indexing 23 items from our website. And our website's much bigger than that. And you'll notice the difference, right? So we added 428 documents to the index at about 6 o'clock today. I reran this scan. So what's the difference? The scan is it running or not? It is running right now. I'm not quite sure. Oh, I didn't change the timing. Okay, but anyways, what I did was for the web crawler, there's a bunch of options. And can I create another? Can we create? Yeah, let's go. I'm going to add another data source just to show you what I did. So if we go to web crawler and if you remember, what we did originally was a source URL. And in that case, we just did this. If I can spell, curiousorbit.com, okay? And we did this, and that's where we got the 23 items in our index. Great, like it worked at least, but it wasn't right. I checked a bunch of things between the last stream and today. I thought at first maybe it was our web application firewall. So we were on a WAF that sits in front of CloudFront, and then CloudFront, our website, is all hosted in S3, it's just a static website. And I thought maybe there was something in the WAF that was blocking it. And I went and checked that and turned some stuff off, did some testing, no change there. Did a couple other things, changed the config of the CloudFront distribution that sits, well, in front of our S3 bucket. And you know the KISS, is it KISS? Keep it simple, stupid, or something like that? It's always the easiest thing. So after having a conversation with AWS technical support, back and forth, checked everything, made sure it all looked okay and everything. Just in passing at the end of the call, I said, well, what if I change it to source sitemaps? And the only difference here is we did this. That's it, okay? And this is what did the trick. So I don't know. I don't know why if you put the source URL in and we set the crawl depth to like, 10 pages, it should have been able to find everything on our website and it just wasn't. But as soon as I changed it to sitemap, it worked. It gathers up. You can see here again, if I just say back, too many windows here. Let's go this way instead. All right, you go back over. Oh, sorry, it was right in front of us. This screen zoom is not great. As soon as I put the sitemap in, it jumped up to 445 pages. So this is great. We do have some errors. I didn't look at these errors. I'll show you where you can find these. I know this is preview, and I know I can only imagine the number of changes that are going to happen to this, based on customer feedback and things like that. Obviously, we're just playing around with this. what's happening right now is when the data source runs, in this case our web crawler, it writes to CloudWatch logs. And it's very complete information. You can see everything that it does. I don't know. Right? Maybe it'll give us some more information. Maybe there's a way that we can change the logging level and stuff in the future. I'll show you kind of what it's showing us right now, and then we can continue to work on the app. What I'd like to do today is see if we can preview the web experience. Sorry. Preview the web experience and actually deploy it. And to deploy this, we have to integrate it with an IDP, an identity provider. We use the AWS Identity Center, which used to be called AWS Single Sign-On, SSO. So I thought today what we could do is see if we can work through the configuration of the AWS Identity Center so then we can authenticate and actually use the web experience. I don't know how far we'll make it, but that's kind of the goal. Excuse me. We also had a few changes to do in the application. If you remember, if you were on the previous stream, one of the things that we were running into, and we were building things and testing things, we had to keep blowing the application away and then rerunning everything. So I cheated and I made some changes in the code between the streams, but we have to finish some things up there. Okay. So lots to do today. Let's jump in and see what we can get finished. So the first thing, I wanted to show you this complete with errors. If you go into the data source, you can see here that you just can view in CloudWatch. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to this one so that we can get a full view of this. What I've noticed is that if I go over to CloudWatch, I'll show you this. So it's going to open up CloudWatch. It's going to go to Log Insights by default. And you see this here. It creates individual log groups for each of your jobs. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So if we just run the run query, you can see that we get lots of information, right? It tells us exactly what it's doing. Log levels, account IDs, what it did, and then you'll see it's pushing things into the index. So lots of good info. I tried to look through this very quickly to see if I could figure out what failed. I'm sure we can just run a query or something like that, but I don't want to get too hung up on this today. But it actually went through and it indexed all of the documents. So that's great. Okay, well, I'll show you what I mean. If I go to log groups, see these Q business things here? These are the different applications that we've created. So if you go back over to your main page, you go to application and you've got an application ID. See this? So it ends in 6B1. So if we go back over here, you can match it up. So there's the log group for our application. And you can see last week or the week before when we were building and destroying things over and over again, we created a bunch of them. If you click in that, here are all the individual log streams. So you get an individual log stream. As far as I can tell, you get an individual log stream for every index job that runs, like every time the crawler runs, but I'm not 100% sure on that yet. It's sort of, some of these times line up with what I expected to see, but I need to kind of read through some docs and watch this a little more, but you can drill into this and see everything that it's doing. Okay, so that's that piece. And then if we go back over here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay. If we go here and you go to Preview Web Experience, this is what we built last week, and we can ask it questions now. So I can do something like, let me zoom in again. I could do something like this. Tell me about Curious Orbit. I did find this process to be slower than I thought, but I would assume it has something to do with the fact that it's in preview at this point, but it's also, remember, we haven't assigned any resources to this application. So I'm sure we could improve the experience, improve the latency of it. But you can see here, it does a really good job, right? And what I thought was really cool about this is it shows you where it's pulling this information from. Okay. I like this. According to your source data, Curious Orbit performs identity management services in IAM and regularly audits access. Curious Orbit helps maintain durability and availability of data stored. It's kind of interesting on how it's pulled these things together, but you can also ask about particular services. So tell me about Orbit Audit, which is one of our services. And it will. Okay, so it's a service provided by us that performs a detailed review of your accounts and the services running within them, blah, blah, blah. And again, where did it get this information? And this is the thing that I was testing last week. We write a lot. Well, if you've watched the streams before, we spend a lot of time working on CloudFormation, templates and things like that. We spend a lot of our time with customers, helping them build and maintain infrastructure using CloudFormation. And we've got a lot of content on our website that relates to best practices and things like that for CloudFormation. So you can do things like this now. Tell me about conditions in CloudFormation. Okay, so it's similar to an if-else statement. You can use templates across multiple environments, and again, from a blog post. Let's ask it something that I don't know if it'll answer. Tell me about some AWS best practices for security. Okay, so again, you can see it's pulling all these different sources of data from our website. Look at that. It's even got one of our account checklist PDF documents that we make available. So it's kind of interesting. Let me do one more thing, and then we're going to jump back and see if we can finish this up. Tell me about Orbit Build and the monthly cost. Monthly cost. Hey, look at that. So it's pulling cost information from the Orbit Build service page. Didn't really tell us what the Orbit Build service is, but that might just be my crappy prompt there too, right? But it works. It's pulled all that data in, and now we're able to write prompts, generate queries and things like that, and get responses back based off of, at this point, just the single data source that we have, our website. Okay. So that's, we've made decent progress. What I want to show you now is the changes that I've made in the actual Boto script that creates all of this. And I'm sure there is a better way to do this, but it does what we want it to do for the time being. If you remember, as we started the stream, what I said was, in the previous stream, when we were doing some testing and stuff, we spent a lot of time going into the console, deleting the application, recreating it, a lot of back and forth. And what I decided to do was I wondered if there were some other API calls that we could make to get us some information about the current status of our QBusiness applications. And you'll notice what I did. And again, it's a little MacGyvery, but it works. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking to see if a QBusiness application with our name already exists. If it doesn't, we'll create it. If it does already exist, we're just going to grab some info from that application. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm running, or I created a function here called listQApps, and I'll show you what that does. So if you scroll up, where is it now? Oh, way up here. Okay, so I just run a list applications call, and I loop through all of the known QBusiness applications in the region that we're operating in. Right now, Q is only supported in 2 regions, Oregon and US East 1. We're in US East 1. And all I'm doing is, as I loop through I guess this is a list. Is it a list? I always forget curly braces versus square braces. I think it's a list. So we loop through the list and we look to see if there's an item in there with a Q app name that matches. And we just set this as a constant earlier on. Probably, again, better ways to do this, but it does the trick for now. And all I do is if I find an application in that list where the display name equals, in our case, a Twitch demo app, I set app exists to true, and we grab the unique application ID because we're going to need that later on. And then I return that back. And you can see sort of how this works, right? Like I said, I'm sure there's more efficient or better ways to do this, but it does the trick. All I do is I say, if the app exists, well, then we know it already exists, and we go on to the next step. Okay. If it doesn't exist, we're going to call our create queue application, and we're going to work through the process. And I can step through each of the pieces. So we've got our application, our index, our retriever, and then our web experience. And I've done this sort of check if something exists. If it doesn't, create it for the app, for the index, for the retriever. And you can see I made it this far and I ran out of time. So this is pretty simple. What I think we'll do is we're going to do the exact same thing here. If we jump back to, let me pull up the bottle documentation for Amazon Q. Let me just find it first and I'll switch the page back. I can never remember if it's called Q Business in here or Amazon Q. Well, here, I'll show you what I'm looking at. Q. Right here, Q Business. Okay. And I wonder if there's a list operation. So we can do list web experience. So this is all I've done. And these list functions are pretty basic. All I have to do is pass in the application ID, and then we check to see if we have that web experience available. Pretty simple. So if we go back to PyCharm, what we could do is the same sort of thing, right? We can just borrow from this other code. So these things here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say web experience exists. And for now, I'll say get web. What did we call the other ones? Okay, list, sorry. So we'll say list Q web experiences, and we'll pass in the client info and the Q app ID. So this here, when we run this first, does the app exist? We pass back the app ID. And then this way we can use that app ID for the rest of these operations, because you'll notice in all of our list operations, there's our index operation. Here's our retriever operation. We pass in that app ID. Okay, so we'll do the same thing with this. And we're going to do it like that. List. There's all our list operations, so we're going to create another one. And Code Whisperer is getting pretty smart here as we've been writing more of this code. So it sets, does the web experience exist, to false, and then our web experience ID to just a blank value. It runs list web experiences. I'm going to pull up the Botto documentation in a different browser so I can stop switching back and forth. Just give me a second. Just drag that over here. And what did it fill for us? List web experiences. Let's see if it got that right. It did. Okay, so it got that, and then we pass in the application ID, and we're doing exactly the same thing. Now, I think in this case, it's a little different. I'm just looking at the docs as we go. Nope, web experience, it pulled that. And default endpoint status. So we maybe will do this a little differently in here. What we're going to do is we're going to say if item status equals, there's a bunch of options, active, then we'll set it to true. Wow. This still amazes me. Like, it's pulling all of this stuff right away. This is the correct response by the looks of it. So we'll pull that in, and then we return those values. It looks pretty good. And then down here, what we can do is just put our silly little if statement in. So we'll say if, I'm going to change this, Q web experience exists, and we're going to change this, right? Q, and we've got to do, what else did we pass back? Where did it go? Those are all creates. Let me shrink these. So we're looking at so much. Get app details. Oh, we passed back this as well. Right, like that. So if the Q web experience exists, oof, that's maybe not what we want there. It's getting a little, does not exist. Right, and then I just commented this out. We can just put this back. Okay. Now, we could pass different values in here. We could make these environment variables instead, just to make this look a little better, but it should do the trick. Now, you'll notice up here, I don't know why I did this, but right before the stream, perfect planning, I decided that I was going to move this project from one location to another. I don't know why I did that, and it messed up our virtual environment. So let's see if we can fix this. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the stream or not, but what we have to do is we just have to recreate our Python interpreter here, and we'll say add a local interpreter. Yeah, 12. It's a virtual environment. Oh, this already exists. Okay, so give me a second. What we'll do is we'll just nuke our virtual environment. Oof. Okay. Clear read-only statuses. Yeah, I think we're okay. The oof. I think I've had this problem before. Hang on one second. Again, don't make changes before the stream is the lesson here. I'll just do this on the command line, and then hopefully that will fix our problem. Where are we? Okay. And then if we reload over here, okay, so that's now gone. And then hopefully that'll let us do this again. So we'll say add a local interpreter. There we go. 12. Not a great way to do this, but it should fix our problem. Okay. And then we've already got our requirements field here. So that'll install everything that we need for the application. And that, in theory, should fix us up. And what we could do now is just run our Q app here and see what it does, right? So yeah, this isn't right. Something didn't happen here, because what should have happened is the web experience should have said that it exists and not tried to create it again. And I don't have great air catching here, but that's basically telling us we've got a conflict with our Q web experience. So let's just check this out and see what I did here. Let's scroll up and look at our list operation. And again, not super great troubleshooting, but let's just go through the responses. Okay, so we get our response back. Just want to make sure we're parsing this properly. Oh, see that? It's pending auth config. So maybe that has to do more with the web experience piece. So we could do this. Because right now we actually, I guess in fairness, we don't have a web experience. What we have is a preview of our web experience. Right? So if we do this. Yeah, see this pending auth config, and that is one of the valid responses. What does that mean? Does it tell us? No, they don't give us all the details. We probably have to look that up in the documentation. All right, so maybe what we could do here is let's get rid of this print statement, because we know that that's right, and we know this code works. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the documentation for setting up, actually deploying the web experience. I pulled up this documentation. So what I did at the beginning of the stream was we previewed our web experience. Okay, we went in and we asked it some questions. Okay, so that's fine. And then what we need to do is we need to deploy the web experience, but in order to do that, you can see here that we have to integrate it with IDP. And I mentioned already that we use IAM Identity Center, so I think we're going to try to set this up and see if we can get this to work. Okay. If we just read through sort of what we have to do here, before we start to integrate with Identity Center, make sure you've completed the following tasks. Okay, so we have an application, we've got a retriever, we've got our data sources, and we've previewed the web experience. And we've got Identity Center enabled already with a couple of users in it, and they have valid email addresses. So we've been using Identity Center, that's fine. All right, so what do we need to do here? In the Q console, choose your application. On the application page, scroll down and click Edit. All right, so let's kind of work through this step by step. So let's get rid of our web experience page. We'll go back to the we got to go to the application. Click this. Now, what did it say? Oh, in the application page, choose web experience settings. So we got to click here. Oh, down here. All right, and we're going to click Edit. And again, it's going to create a role for us. I'm okay with that as we're doing the POC stuff here. Eventually, I'd like to get this, all of the sort of underlying infrastructure pieces, because if you remember, we now have 3 different roles that are involved. There's the Q business role. There's a role associated with our retriever, and now there's going to be a role associated with, oh wait, let me check this. No, this is creating a new service role. So now we've got a role associated with our web experience. So in theory, what we could do is we could read through the documentation, create all of these ahead of time using something like CloudFormation. So we have that all codified in our repo, in our case GitLab, and then refer to these later on in our scripts. But to get this working, I think what we'll do is we're just going to kind of follow along in the console and see if we can get it working. Okay, so there's we're going to create a new service role. That's fine. For service role name, that's fine. We've done that already. So we need to copy the ACS URL and the audience URI. Okay, where's my note-taking app? Give me a second here. All right, so we need our ACS URL. That's this. Dump that there, and it also asked us to grab the audience, which is that. Okay, now we have to go over to the Identity Center console. All right, so just bear with me a second. I'm going to log into our Identity Center to our account. For the time being, though, while I do that, I'm going to flip you back over here for one sec. I just want to make sure I'm not sharing anything I don't want to share. So let me just get logged in here. And I'm just going to check where it's asking us to go. All right, perfect. So now let me flip back to what I'm actually looking at. So here is our current setup, and you can see we've already got Code Whisperer set up for our organization, and this is how we're using Code Whisperer just to test it out. So that's all ready. And then what we need to do on the applications, choose Add Application. Oops, too many windows open. Okay. Select application type. I have an application I want to set up. That's this one. Okay, so we're doing SAML 2.0. And we'll say next. All right, so what's our display name? We're going to call this Gordo. Q Business AI Assistant. Okay. Gordo knows stuff. Ask them for help. Okay. All right, so that's good. Then what do we need to do? Enter a name, enter a description. Okay, so the first thing is we need to download our metadata file. Let me zoom in a little bit because I'm realizing that this is not easy to see. So we'll download that. Okay. So we've done that. We've done the download the metadata. Scroll down to application metadata and type in your metadata values. So these are the values that we copied already. I'm going to drag this over here. So here we need our ACS, which we got from here. Okay. Relay state, yeah, we don't have relay state, so we'll leave that. And then we need our ACS. Oh, did I put that in the wrong spot? I did. That doesn't go there, it goes here. And then we need our audience, which is this. Okay. So far, so good. Does it say submit? All right. So we'll say submit. And I got to zoom out here a little bit. Okay, so we're going to assign users now. And I'll just assign myself for the time being. Okay. On the details pane, choose actions, edit attribute mappings. Oh, up here, actions, edit attribute mappings. And then I think it has to do, leave the user attribute in the application column set to the default attribute name subject. What happened there? Okay, so subject. I see what they mean. For maps to this string value or user entity, map the subject to email. Okay. I think this is the default setting, which should be okay. Do we have to change the format? Set the format to unspecified. Okay, and then say save. Okay. Choose add new attribute mapping. Back up here. And what do they want us to do here? For user attribute in the application, email. Okay, I see what they're doing. So this is going to be email like that. And then click Save. Go back to the queue and make sure that you're on the Deploy Experience web page, which we should have open here. All right. Scroll down to the Provide Metadata for your application and upload the XML data. So we can go here. Okay, so there's our XML. And then for this, what does it say to do here? Enter the attribute name you provided for Identity Center. For example, email could be the attribute name. Choose deploy. Okay, I think we used email. So let's try it. Choose deploy. Oops, wrong screen. So let's try it. Deploy. Okay. There are no errors. That's a good sign. And then it says, choose the URL to open your web experience, enter your credentials for a user that has access. So back here, now we have a deployed URL. Click on that. And again, I'm going to flip you back over here for a second. And I'm just going to get logged in. Look at that. So now I've authenticated and we're using our new Gen AI assistant. That's pretty neat. Okay, I know it doesn't have a lot of information in it, so let's ask it some more questions. So look at that. It's pulling in data from our security checklists, security services. Orbit Edge is another service that we have. All right, let's try something else. Can you create a CloudFormation template that deploys a EC2 instance? I don't know if it'll be able to do this. I know we have code snippets on the site, but I don't think it'd be able to do something like that. It's not really showing us a template, is it? Salt server. Look at that. Look how old this is. It's from 2016. This is actually one of the original blog posts. So SaltStack, if you're not familiar, is sort of like it's like an automation tool. You know, if you've ever used Ansible or something like that, it's very similar to that. And it looks like maybe at one point here we were building out a SaltStack server in a VPC using CloudFormation. I don't know what happened to the template though. There must be a broken link here. But it Can you show me I don't see how this would work. Yeah, it doesn't, okay? But we've got this thing working. So we've got our script built that deploys everything. CloudFormation at this point isn't something that's supported by the QBusiness solution. Got the script working, deploys everything. We've integrated it into identity and access management. Let's go back to PyCharm. And when we first created this, we had a little README here of everything that we wanted to do. So we've now created a web experience. We've tested it to see what happens. We've created, let me do this, create a Webcrawler data source. Okay, that works. Let me do this. Note we have to use source sitemap. Okay. Add logic to avoid ongoing deletion and creation. We're mostly done that. We're going to go back and look at the web experience thing again. Create a CFN template to create the roles and policy docs. Yeah, we could start working on that. I'll flip back and I'll show you this. So all your data is encrypted by default in Q, but it uses a key that is created and managed on our behalf by Q. And I was thinking, like, most times we'll use a customer managed key, a CMK, to do that work. So I thought maybe just, again, as an exercise here to go through this, we could create a customer managed key and refer to that in our script. This is sort of a duplicate of that guy, so we'll delete that. Add a web crawler to the application. We didn't do this via Boto 3. The code to do that is, there's a lot of code there, and it could be overwhelming. So we'll have to have another look at that. And then there's some other crawlers that we looked at possible. So we use Jira for all of our ticketing. We use Slack for all of our communication, internal communication, as well as customer communication. So that would be a really great data source to have access to through Q if you're looking for something. I don't know about you, but a lot of times you're kind of 90% sure that you were having that conversation in Slack, but then you try to go back in Slack and find it. Being able just to maybe ask a question to your Gen AI assistant to go and find that info for you, that might be quite valuable. Okay. All right, so that's pretty good. We've got some stuff to work. Whoops, I don't know what I did there. Let's try that again. Okay. So here, let's go back to Firefox. And what I wanted to do is, if we went back here, this probably, I wonder how hard this would be to do programmatically. Yeah, so if you had your metadata, your role, your attributes, and your attributes, like, that's not a bad API call, right? And I'm sure Boto has that. Yeah, there's our create web experience. So that's the web experience, but then it's like, we need data source index plugin retriever. What's this? Don't know what that's used for. Doesn't look like it has the IDP call in here. Yeah, I don't see it. Well, we could look, why don't we look at the code for the web experience piece? Go back here. Now, if I just run this again, what's it going to do? So our web experience doesn't exist, creating it, and then we get that conflict. So again, let's print this and see what we get. See, still says pending auth config. I kind of thought that would change. If we go here, okay, this screen is now different. Where'd our app go? Application. Okay, here we go. There's our role. There's the URL. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about the web experience piece. I wonder if when we created this, I don't remember now. I wonder if when we created the web experience in the original stream, if we just did that manually the first time, just to get it working as a test. It's probably what we did. So if we go back to PyCharm, what's it actually doing down here? All right, Q, web experience. A Twitch demo experience. Let's do something else. Let's go like this. Print Q web exists, and then Q. Let's run the print statement there too. Does it give us anything? Yeah, see that it's set to false. So I'm doing something wrong up here then. Oh yeah, of course I'm not doing anything wrong because it's not set to active, it's set to pending auth config. This I'm a little confused about. There's our web experience ID. It ends in 05E. Can we see that information on the screen here? We can't. Yeah, that I'm not sure about. That part I don't quite understand. Let me try something just to see what it does. What if we go down here and so it's returning false because the status is pending auth config. Let's look that up in the doc. So this is what we did. We ran the create web experience. There's really not much to this, right? We pass in the application ID, The rest of it is all optional. And I think all we did was we put in title, web message, and all it responds back to you with is the ARN and the ID of the web experience. Okay. Actually, give me a second. AWS CLI 2. I'm just going to pull up, here, I'll show you what I'm looking at. So let's do get web experience with an application ID and our web experience ID. Okay, so let's do, is there a list? So in this case, we just need to do an application ID. So let's go here. There's our application ID. If we pull up Cloud Shell, I already forget what it was. List web experience, list web experiences. And then it was what, dash dash. Okay, so there's our web experience ID. It says its status is active. But when we run our script, am I passing in something wrong in here? The client ID and the app ID. Let's do this. Let's just print that and see what we get. So it ends in 9CD. Okay, that's interesting. That's definitely not our application ID. Oh, I know what the problem is. Okay, I'm going to leave you on this screen for a second because I've got to change the config file. Oh, silly. I'll explain what's wrong here in a second. All right. So let's go back to PyCharm and let's run it again. There we go. Okay, let's clean up our print statements because we don't need them. Get rid of this. All right, let's just run it again and we should see a quick run through. True. Oh yeah, we've got that print statement down here too, right? Right here. So if we get rid of that. Right? Okay. So here's the issue. I needed some help with tech support for this, right? Well, in our little demo account, we don't have, we just have free support. So what I did was I modified this config YAML file. It's pointed at our demo account normally, and I pointed it at the account that we have support in to be able to deploy the Q app, set it all up like we have in our little demo account here, and then be able to open a ticket and get some support for it. And I forgot to switch it back. So what was happening here is I changed this script, and in the demo account, I didn't need to actually deploy the web experience because it wasn't the web experience that I was having problems with. It was the, what was it? The crawler, right? So in the other account, I didn't bother with the web experience. So what was happening is it's connecting to the other account where our, let's call it the support app is running, and it's got everything except for the web experience. It's trying to create one, and it's, the script was just a mismatch, right? I'm in two different accounts there. So that's perfect. We've got our script running at this point, and everything looks good. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Now we've got, if I flip back over to Firefox, actually, sorry, let me go back to the README file. Yeah, this is now sort of CFN work to set some of these things up. I might just make some notes on all the work we have to do. We're at an hour already, so I might wait and complete some of this work in our next stream. But if we look at Firefox, what do we need? We need, I'll call this an application role. Okay, so we'll do this. Application role. So that's the first one. We need a data source. It also has its own role. Okay. So this is what, a data source role. Data source role. So that's that. And then we need, the third one we need is, what's happening with my browser all of a sudden? There we go. It came back to life. A web experience role. Okay, so here I'll show you what I've done. Maybe. So I put these in the wrong spot, but this here should really be here in our CF template. We've added all the logic now to, if we needed to delete something, what we could do here in theory now is delete, let's say, the web experience, and the script should be able to say, hey, I've got all these other pieces, I'll just create the web experience. We've got to set up our CFN roles. You know, the other thing that we should do, let me do it like this. Create required CFN templates. We'll do it like this instead. And I'll just say IAM resources. Secrets manager resources. Wow. And then we're going to need an S3 bucket as well. And then we'll change this one to CMK. Okay, so that's all of these. Kind of like that, right? Add the Q Webcrawler. Okay, so that we don't have through Boto. And then let's look, let's do this. And if we flip back over to the documentation, let's have a look here and see if there's anything else in this doc that would make sense for us to try. GitHub server, GitHub, what's this? Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't think we could do this. We're not using GitHub, we're using GitLab. So that might not work. I think it's two different things. Gmail might be neat though. how do we do this? What do we need? Google Cloud Platform admin account and have a cloud project. Activated the Gmail API and the admin SDK API. Create a service account and downloaded the JSON private key for your Gmail account. Copy your admin account and then set up OAuth. Yeah. Google Drive would probably be more useful, but it's probably the same, yeah. Admin SDKs, Google Drive SDKs. Microsoft Teams, Yammer. Microsoft Yammer. Wow. Postgres, Quip, Salesforce, Slack. Yeah, I think at least for testing and doing some more demos on this, using the Slack connector and the Jira connector would probably be for us the two most useful things. How do we set this up? An API token authentication credentials that include a Jira username or email and Jira credentials. You know, the interesting thing about this is both Jira authenticates through Identity Center, so it'd be interesting if we could set this up, and then Slack is standalone, so we might be able to set that one up using the console. What's an identity crawler? Crawls ACL information at the document level for supported data sources. Oh, I remember I was in a webinar, I think it was actually on the AWS Twitch stream the other day, and they were talking about this. And essentially what this does is it allows you to like basically restrict what somebody could see, because think about it this way, like if I have access to a certain project in Jira, then when I authenticate and am running queries against it, then I should only be able to see the data from the Jira project that I'm associated to, or the Jira Confluence documentation that I'm associated to, not that somebody else has access to, right? Like two separate projects, two different levels of access for me as a user. So yeah, that makes sense. So we'd have to set up an identity crawler as well. Now, it would make sense that Slack probably requires that as well, right? Oh, it doesn't say anything about an identity crawler here. Is that because maybe we're accessing Note, your workspace ID from your Slack workspace, and your team ID? Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. It's interesting that they mention it in the Jira one, but not here. Maybe it. Okay, so we've got all that, our data sources. Oh, there it is. I wasn't looking in the right spot. There's our identity crawler. So really then, if we think about this, if we wanted to set this up, these extra crawlers, okay, so that's going to be a prerequisite for both the Slack crawler and the Jira crawler. All right, perfect. Well, I think we're going to call it here tonight, folks. A shorter stream than normal. Short week equals short stream. We'll be back next week, maybe continue on this, or flip back into some type of new project. I'm not quite sure yet. We'll see how that goes. But thanks for joining me tonight, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.